Now, let us talk about the spheres of security in more detail. As you know, there are the people are on the left hand side, right hand side, and the technology on the left hand side. And then you have formed 3 spheres, namely systems, networks and internet on the left hand side, while you see the people on the right hand side. This sphere of security forms the foundation of a security net framework. As I mentioned, information is core and it can be attacked directly by the people, and it can also be attacked indirectly left on the left hand side through the internet, network and systems. Now, what is very important here is how do we stop this attack. So, at every level, as you see a track, and each track is an isolation of the internal layer to the external layer. It provides you a boundary or an isolation or what you call as an access control, you can call any way. Now, you look at every boundary. For example, let us take one boundary like information and people. So, what prevents people from accessing information? The policy and law, the education and training you give, and then the regulations that you have at your data centers, right. So, if you look at people and the semi ring people on your right hand side and the information, and if you just look at what is there on the track between that semi ring and that information, you see all the access controls and the policies. So, when I am arriving at a security policy, I should look at each one of this boundary in great detail. So, you have so many things here. For example, internet and the external world, you have network intrusion detection system, proxy servers, encryption, backup, so many things that you see, and lot of redundancy, patches, upgrades, host ID, so IDS, so many things that you see, and all these things at a very broad outline should be part of your security, information security policy. So, the sphere of security essentially forms a very good framework for you to start populating the policies inside your IS policy document. The sphere of security can be viewed in 2 ways. One is sphere of use, and the next one would be sphere of protection. The sphere of use essentially says what every sphere can do with the internal sphere, with the layers internal to it, what people can do with information, what systems can do with information, what network can do with systems, and what network can do to information through the systems, what internet can do through the local network, through the systems, to the information. So, the sphere of use basically talks about the different functionalities, different authorized functionalities that a user, a person can do directly or indirectly, or any other asset can do directly or indirectly on your information. So, that is what we call as the sphere of use. Now, the sphere of protection actually is a overlay on the sphere of rule, which basically says when you do certain actions on that on the information, these are the checks that need to be done for the different functionalities. Now, the sphere of protection basically is achieved by looking at people, policies and technologies who are and trying to impose access control on each one of this. So, the entire IT policy document, when it is formed, looks at the sphere of look at the IT sphere, and then there could be 2 policies that could be inferred from this sphere. The one is based on the sphere of use and another is a sphere of protection. So, we have already talked about controls, and we did tell you that control is very important for getting the necessary or desired information, the security from an information technology point of view. And at that time we also talked about two types of controls, namely administrative and technical controls. Now, the administrative control, both these controls should be part of your IT security policy, and when we start listing these controls, we can look at from the administrative control we had looked at things like segregation of duties. From the technical control we have looked at access controls, we have looked at password, etc. Now, another way of looking at administrative control here could be to divide this or partition this administrative control into two parts, namely the management controls and the operational controls. So, the management controls actually cover security processes that are designed by the strategic planners and performed by security administration of the organization, while the operational controls deal with the operational functionality of security in the organization, namely personal security, physical security, and the protection of production inputs and outputs. A very simple management control would be to say that this is the architecture, these are the authorized personals who can have access to some part, right. So, this should be restricted to this, while another a very simple example of an operational control would be that when you take out a system, the disk should be completely trashed, right. The disk should not go out as a e-waste, but it should be completely destroyed, and only the remnants of that destruction should go out. So, that is an operational control. So, these are all these are something that goes into the control aspects of your document. So, let us look at the framework in just list this slide actually lists all the different frameworks from the control point of view. The management controls, program management, system security plan, life cycle maintenance, risk management, review of security controls, legal complaints, etc. While you look at operational controls, contingency planning, security, estimated times, and personal security, physical security, production inputs and outputs, hardware and software systems maintenance, data integrity, etc. And you have technical controls which we have already talked of, like logical access controls, identification, authentication, authorization, accountability, audit trails, log management, asset classification and control, and then cryptography. So, all these form part of your technical control. So, the next thing that we need to next ingredient of your security policy which will help you is to actually which will help you more on the standard. So, the policy comes out with some standard. The next thing that will help you on the standard would be these two things, what we call as defense in depth and security perimeters. What is defense in depth? We will see both of this in great detail in the next two slides. So, this is what we call as defense in depth. If an intruder wants to intrude from an external intruder wants to intrude into your system, then he needs to cross several tiers of security. For example, if you take an airport, it is actually a defense in depth. There is a security who checks at the entry, then there is a check-in counter which authenticates you, then there is another security check who checks all your baggages, etc. And then there is another person who validates whether you are going into the correct plane, and then there is another security check who ensures whether you are you have got the security stamp, you have done the security check properly, and then when you are about to board the plane, another somebody checks your card. So, there is several layers of security that happens. That is an example of a defense in depth, and similar thing you can see in the slide also. When I have an untrusted internet and which I do not trust, and then it comes through a firewall. The firewall essentially has an external filtering router and a dual horn host, and then another internal filtering router, then it goes to a header into a trusted network. So, this is what we mean by defense in depth. So, how much defense should I have, how much depth should I have in this defense? Defense is directly proportional to depth, more the depth more the defense, but more the depth less will be the performance, more will be the cost. So, the person in the untrusted network should quickly access your data, but at the same time should be prevented from doing some undesirable actions, and that is again the balance here. The next thing is about perimeters and domains. What I mean by a perimeter, so I have an untrusted network, that untrusted network or whatever you call as the external filtering router is the interface between the untrusted part and the trusted network. So, that forms the perimeter. So, all the devices in this perimeter will partition your access space between what you call as a demilitarized zone and a untrusted zone, right. So, what does this say? When I am arriving at a standard or a procedure, not exactly at the policy level, but at the standard level or at a procedure level, when I am looking at this at least the standard will talk lot about the devices that are on the perimeter of your untrusted and the trusted network, because that will be the most important part of your policy. A weakness there can be thoroughly made vulnerable, can lead to lot of vulnerability. A weakness at the perimeter can essentially lead to lot of vulnerability. So, this is what we talk of as perimeters. Now, the key components that will be part of your the defense and the perimeter will be these firewalls, which will form what we call as the demilitarized zone, and that demilitarized zone will separate your untrusted network from the trusted network. So, you see a normal deployment in a data center where your untrusted network comes in, it goes through a various firewalls and proxy servers, and then there is some internal both external filtering and internal filtering before you go into the trusted network. So, in this way, if such a defense is available, then you are much more protected than the thing. Now, another type, so we had actually seen a firewall, but that is actually different from an intrusion detection system I just talked about in some of the earlier classes. So, what does the intrusion detection system does? It actually examines packets on network and alerts administration of unusual patterns, right. So, there is a network intrusion detection system. There is also a host intrusion detection system which examines files stored on host and alerts administration of changes, right. So, there are two types of intrusion detection systems. One is the host intrusion detection system, and another is the network intrusion detection system, and each does different functionalities. But please do understand, IDS is different from firewall. So, the last part of what should be inside your information security policy is what you call as the Seta. What is Seta? Seta or Seta? This is nothing but security, education, training and awareness. And the goals of the Seta should be to educate the employees on security, should train the employees on security, should create an awareness of the employee on security. So, what is the difference between education, training and awareness, right? This is very, very important, because if people are not, people, process, technology, they form the foundation. If people are the most important vital asset that you have, and that asset is not people are one of the most important defense that you have against external attacks. And if in the sphere, if you see, people do matter quite a bit, and if this people, the ring that you put around the people, so let me just go to that slide for a, the outermost ring that you put there, right, and the innermost ring between the people and the information, please note that education and training form part of both the rings, and if you are not going to train these users, they are going to become extremely, they are going to cause big vulnerabilities in this. So just to emphasize that continuous education, training and awareness on information security is a must for the and every HR should note this, any HR, every HR of all organizations which are IT driven should take this point very, very seriously, and it should be part of your academic calendar. And I think at least with banks, I am sure the Reserve Bank does say talk about documenting schedules of how people are trained in information security. So that is very, very important. Now let us go, and we have talked about three things. We talked about education, training and awareness. What is the difference between this? So this is a very nice framework. I just leave it for you to just go through this by this has been done by NIST. So in education, we talk about why we want to have information security, but training we say how do you achieve this, awareness you say what it is, right. If somebody is educated in information security, he has an insight into the problem. In training, he has a knowledge to this problem. In awareness, he has some information about this problem. Education, the objective of education is to make the fellow understand this. The objective of training is to create a skill set in him. The objective of awareness is to just say, oh, he is aware. There is no objective of that. It is just that you make person aware of that. So in education, we have theoretical instructions which come out of these type of lectures, discussions, seminars, background reading. Training, again it is lecture, case study, workshops, hands on practice. Awareness is just videos, newsletters, posters. In education, we have that way we test the understanding is by essay or interpret learning, how he has interpreted it. In training, we say how he is applying what he has learned. In awareness, it is just multiple choice questions. So and again, education will have long term impact, while training has intermediate, while awareness would have short term. Why I spent more time on this slide is to just basically tell you that the 6 levels of courses that we are offering is going to address education, training and awareness. So the first level would be more of between awareness and training, right, and a bit on education, but slowly as we go to the next stage, it will be more of training and then and a little more on education, and as we go to level 6, it will be lot of education. So that is how we have also structured these 6 levels of course. Now this is a very just to add some, I have been talking lot of technical things, so this is a very interesting awareness example. I leave it for you to see and laugh over. And also Swachh Bharat, do not throw your cigarette butts on the floor. So the last 2 minutes I will be spending to tell you, again going back to the introductory theme, we as technologists or computer scientists or trainers can only build dams, can build these technologies, but to fill it with water is the onus of the people who are using this. And so it is very important that people get educated, trained, are aware and trained and educated on information technology so that they use it properly. So everyone who is attending this course should practice safe computing, and I will give you some examples. I have the best challenges while implementing InfoSec, I have best firewall, I have insisted, but still I can't do, I am not getting that security. Reason is people. And the challenge here is people have to be unfreezed, they have some notions of security that needs to be, as technology changes, as threat models changes, right, the people have to be unfreezed, then they have to be set moving, and then they have to be refreezed with the new technology. So that is the challenge here. It is not that if people are consistently moving with the technology, then there is no issue, but what happens is typically in this we have sudden bout of attacks. So people are already set for something, they are doing those, now we need to change to adhere to this, and this change is not if they are freezed on something. So we go and unfreeze them, then we make them move, and again we refreeze them. And why should we freeze them? Because we want to follow rules. The moment we want to follow rules, we want to make somebody adhere to rules, then it is necessary that we freeze them on those concepts, and this is the biggest challenge in implementing information security. Then the other practical issue is that never think that the computer can do everything. Again, people matter quite a bit. The computer cannot distinguish whether I am logging into the system, Kamakoti is logging, or Dilip Iyer is logging into the system. It actually has, it is based on some need to know and need to do principles, it has all these restrictions, everything, but the notion is Kamakoti has to be very strict and secure, so that he does not leak the password to Dilip and enable him to enter the system. The system will only see the login, it will not see the person unless you have some biometry and other things, right. So these are the things that we need to be careful, and still, as we have mentioned in this module, everything is password driven, or even you have even hardware security token, I can give the security token to Dilip and still he can log in as me. So unless I put some discipline, I practice this complete understanding, and I practice the I understand the implications of trying to share some credentials of mine with others, that getting a good security system is a difficult task. The next thing is change. It is not uncommon for an organization to choose to conduct a project that will have impact on the organization's security posture itself. For example, introduction of a new technology, implementation of a standard, for example ISO 27001. So at least such type of drills are done, but it need to be done in a better perspective. These type of exercises should be done with a genuine interest to improve the stature of your organization, and not just as a compliance with a regulatory guideline. Oh, RBI said this should be done, so I am doing. It's wrong. I am doing it for the benefit of my organization, and it is incidental that RBI takes a note of it, right. So that mindset has to come, and this type of the management usually should move forward on the basis that since it is in everyone's best interest that everybody should endorse for this project, and they should make a very consistent attempt to see that this people are well trained and the policies are correctly implemented, and that often helps. Otherwise, when there is a root shock in terms of a big security lapse, that day will never be a Thanksgiving day to the organization. So, Bayom Bekhanom, Sagodara Sagodarigale, Tamma Tangigale, Annalu Akalu, brothers and sisters, we come to the end of this module 1, and one thing that we would have realized here is that in information security there is nothing permanent except change, and we have to change consistently, keep changing ourselves for a better information security environment. We will now move to module 2 in the next session, where we will talk more on these policies. Thank you. Nandri.